Hi, everyone, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. My name is Diena Lee Mann, founder and CEO of Spectio. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Megan Brown, Director of Global Center of Excellence for Advanced Analytics and Data Science at Starbucks. Megan, thank you so much for joining us today. Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been at Starbucks the last 7 years. I've worked across a number of domains and landed in the Center of Excellence role facing our international markets. But my background is actually much broader than this. So I started out as a fifth grade teacher and an academic. And most of my methods for data science actually came from my academic background. At some point, I defected from academia. For a variety of reasons, some of which were I wanted a sense of team and I wanted to see the impact of my work much faster. And I followed some friends out to data science and industry, and I've been here ever since.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, so let's start with an interesting statistic. So it's been found that the average tenure of a CDO is 18 months. And in your perspective, why is this job so difficult?
Well, I think it's a very young kind of organization for a lot of companies, right? And we generally work across multiple domains. And so if you are leading a team like this, you end up in a meeting with operations, a meeting with marketing, a meeting with HR, a meeting with just everyone under the sun to try and figure out what data they have, what data they need, and how they're thinking about their business and where they could use analytics or data science. And very it's a very jarring switch to go from something like HR to marketing, right? Like these are very different concerns. Now, clearly, we're all concerned with the same bottom line, but very different pathways to get there. And you have to be very nimble to work across. I also think that there's a bit of learning that like greater organization has to do about data science and analytics work in general. Um, Data aren't magic, analytics aren't magic, and data science is most certainly not magic. Uh, but there's a lot of hype in the field that makes it seem like, yeah, you just flip the switch and turn it on, and there you go, and you're set for life, and you'll have all of these magic incremental returns with minimal effort. And that's not actually how any of this sorts out. So I think one of the things, if the organization's really new to the business, like in its first 4 or 5 years, the CDO has to advocate for infrastructure, right? Data products. These don't have direct, immediate returns. And it's genuinely difficult to get people's attention on these things. And so there's a number of strategies CDOs have to try to get anywhere. But if you end up in a role where the will is not there in the greater org to fund these expensive foundational initiatives, you know there's only so far you can take it without infrastructure because you're relying on team heroics, you're relying on things that can't be replicated again. um, when we all know in our hearts what we should be working towards is something more systematic, with better definitions, with better standards and data quality, and that actually enables everything that's to come, right? So everything from in-house data science models to Gen AI are completely dependent on the quality of your data. And if you can't motivate your organization, or you think you've gone as far as you can in that organization, then, yeah, you should move on.
Interesting. So you touched on an interesting point. It seems that to become a leader in this field, one has to get closer to the business. Now, how has that worked for you?
Um, it, I so I am very curious about people and their work, right? So I'm actually a cognitive experimental psychologist by training who just ended up at the quant edge of the field. And so I find going in with a beginner's mind is quite helpful, right? Like I know analytics and data science pretty well, but I don't actually know marketing nearly as well. And going in with some humility, the beginner's mind means you can ask all of the most basic, fundamental, simple questions. Like I apologize before I ask them because it's like, I'm sorry, you're going to have to go back to marketing 101 for me. Um, but I find that asking those questions proves that you're interested, proves that you don't think you know everything, which can be a stereotype of us. It also proves that you're trying to break your own assumptions about their line of business, right? And when you break those assumptions, that's actually often where the opportunities are, especially around decision intelligence, for example. Those assumptions are really, really important. And if you miss them, you're going to build something that's not nearly as useful as it could have been. Getting close to the business is just so important. So we have a number of different ways of doing this at Starbucks. We're a very relationship-oriented company. We use immersions. So in your first 3 to 6 months, you're meeting with people over coffee to talk about any number of things, but primarily to build your relationship with them so that you can work together well in the future. I also rely a bit on change management methods. I kind of sneak them in because not all cultures practice change management, but actually there's a lot of really useful structures there for building, maintaining, communicating across really complicated relationships. But in my data science work, I'm fundamentally motivated by business questions, business problems, business opportunities where I think data can play. And I would never know those from the outside. So I need to get closer and I need to bring my teams closer. So, that's just necessary for the role, I think.
Gotcha. And what are some ways that companies can get their data and analytics teams better aligned with the various business functions that they serve?
I think it depends heavily on the model, right? So one of the tensions I've lived through for many years is the shared service versus like a product or R&D model. And there's a spectrum in between, obviously, because we all try to balance all the things. When you are a shared service, you're very, very focused on customer service, right? You are dedicated to your stakeholders. Often they're the ones that give you the resources in these models. And stakeholders, as they get more used to data, get more demanding with data. And so you end up with teams that are very, very close to embedded, right? Very, very aligned with their business functions. They own the relationships, and really the struggle there is making the work a bit bigger, a bit more broad-minded, and a bit more systematic. Because the risk is in a shared service function that you're doing things really quick, and you're not necessarily building them for the long term. And the joy is that things come back, right? So that question that you answered 3 months ago might not come back in 3 months, but it'll come back in 6 months. Or that metric you created for that one project you did that someone thought was really cool, now they're in charge. And that metric's going to become really important to that line of the business, but you didn't build it in a way that would make it usable in dashboards, right? And so within shared services, there's got to be a little bit of pacing. And then you can pull all of the air out of the room for sort of larger initiatives, unless you've got a really excellent business champion. From the R&D function or the product style org, those can be really siloed, and they tend to follow the vision of a data science AI analytics leader, but the relationships with the business can be a bit weaker there, which can affect how they launch, right? If you build something without being closely connected to the business might not see it as useful as it could be. They might not use it to its full capability, or, the risk is that like they see it and they say, oh, I mean, that's cool, but it doesn't actually line up with any of our business processes. And you either have to rebuild or walk away from it in the worst case scenario. And so really you need your visionaries between orgs talking to kind of mitigate that, but you still need some kind of management of the communications, management of the change that you're inflicting on them, really from an R&D perspective. And I think a lot of leaders try and do a more balanced approach, right? Because they have to meet the needs of the business. They also know that the future rests in a lot of these AI or Gen AI solutions. And then that only really works with a lot of excellent product and project management, because through those roles, that's really how you get all sorts of clarity about scope, requirements, who your stakeholders are, what the roles of your team are, what are they actually working on, so they can't be randomized in either direction. Like the R&D is not a sneaky side project, and the shared service isn't crushing your R&D function. But I know that product and product management can be a bit of an overhead for a small or young org, right? And so there's often this like growth moment where they're like, oh, we actually need to manage these things. How do we do that? All of our whole team culture and all of our processes are built around the assumption of no product management. But now we're big enough that we actually really have to, and it'll be better for us in the long run.
So thank you so much, Megan, for sharing your experience and thoughts with us today. You are truly a wonderful role model and an inspiration in our field. Please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews.